All right, guys. Thanks, everybody, for hanging around Bsides and checking out the last talk of the day. My name is Stephen Heath. On Twitter, I'm Delisnia. And I'm just going to start off and give you just a real brief kind of summary of who I am. That picture tells you about all you need to know. I'm about the nerdiest guy you can get. I also work as the Director of Security Services for a consulting firm up in Washington State called Intrinium. You know, I have a master's in computer science, lots of certs that I have to get to fill out RFPs. Worked at IT for about 10 years, moved over to security consulting. Now I run a team of consultants, security analysts, two-year-old son, sports fanatic, serious nerd. The reason I go through all of this, and the reason I'm here giving this talk, is that, you know, when I jumped over to doing the security consulting, I was hired by a small group. I was just the first guy of the group that was doing security consulting. After 3 or 4 years, we've been really successful. We've grown everything out. Now I'm running the division. Suddenly I have to be hiring people, building a team, and none of my background, being of a technical background, really prepared me for having to do that kind of work. And so, you know, I learned along the way a lot of, you know, made some mistakes as I was going through. And so I kind of wanted to come here and really just share that story of, you know, here are the pitfalls, here are the mistakes I made when I was coming up and learning how to hire people. And I'm actually really glad that I got a chance to go after Johnny and Eve in their talk, because, you know, you're going to hear a lot of kind of the same themes, you know, of things that, you know, I did that actually went wrong, you know, in a hiring. And so I'm just going to start off by basically saying, okay, this is probably the way that, you know, if you're in a position where you have to hire, or if you're, say, just starting out, and you've kind of looked at things from a more technical perspective, you're probably looking at things and thinking that, you know, you know, that the whole process is kind of a waste of time. You want to focus on what, you want to focus on the stuff that you want to do, the technology and the hacking. And so when the time comes, you know, somebody quits, they get fired, and you panic, and you're like, well, shit, now I got to get somebody else out here. I got to get somebody, I've got work to do. We got to get work done. We got to get through this. So, you know, you talk to HR and you dust off the job description that you had for the position. You say, well, you know, yeah, I need one more of those information security analysts. I need another consultant. Just get me that, and we'll throw out the job description and do that. So then you post that thing online. You post it on Dice or Monster or some other crap. You get a ton of horrible resumes. They basically come pouring in. You get, you know, people, you know, I mean, we're up in Spokane, Washington. You know, we want people who are local. We're looking for them. You know, we get applications from India. We get applications from Michigan. We get applications from all over. You know, and on the one hand, it's like, okay, fine, that's great that you're doing this, but, you know, we're not in a position where you can do a bunch of relocation, all that other stuff. So, you know, you end up wasting a bunch of time going through resumes you don't need. You know, you look them over, and hey, you know, you find about 3 or 4 semi-good ones that aren't horrible. And so you decide, okay, I'm going to interview them. And you get them in the room, and you're like, hey, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And, you know, you have all these go-to questions that HR tells you, man, you got to use these. So you go to those, you know, and you end up hiring one of them. And then it gets a little interesting, because in about 3 months you regret it. And you're like, dang it, I completely messed that one up. But you convince yourself, you know what, I can fix it. So you spend the next 3 months just being frustrated out of your mind while you're trying to fix this problem that you've actually got with this employee. And eventually you fire him again, and guess what? Then you panic because you have to start the whole thing over again. So, you know, what I wanted to do is basically, you go back to square one, and you go through this enough times, you realize that really, honest to God, the best way to deal with an employee that isn't going to work out for you, isn't going to work for what you need them to do, is just don't hire them in the first place. You really have to think about your hiring process and, you know, actually be making a lot more intelligent decisions about who you bring into your team and what you do. So the first thing I like to start with is, you know, and this kind of dovetails in very much to what we heard earlier, but you got to actually think about, what am I actually looking for? And really, honest to God, the job description is mostly worthless. It's a general idea of, you know, a list of possible things that you might be doing sometime, and then some extra duties as assigned that they'll throw on the end. But what really actually matters to you is, okay, do they have the technical skills to be able to get this done? Maybe do they have to have a certain amount of experience? Maybe, though I tend to agree with them earlier that experience isn't actually that great of a factor. Are they going to fit with your culture? That's a huge part of any hire that you're going to make. Nothing can ruin your productivity of your team, of your group, worse than getting someone in there that just completely doesn't fit. Okay. The other thing, passion. And again, I can't stress this enough. INFOSEC is at times a thankless job. You are out there, you're fighting the battles at the front lines, and a lot of times, particularly if you're doing the consulting work, you're getting in the way of the other people's IT company. The IT group, is saying, well, we want to be able to do this, we want to be able to do that, and you have to stand up and say, hey, no, you can't do that, that's not secure. Even if you're working in corporate, you're always going to be the bad guy. You're going to be saying this. So you want somebody who's passionate and really wants to evangelize the message and spread it out and tell everyone, passion actually matters. And then, obviously the other one is the soft skills, we're way past the point where you can have just the guy who's, the really weird guy who lives in the basement and he just does the firewalls all day. We're kind of past the point that you can have that. We need someone who can fit in with the team and integrate with the rest of the business, or be able to be sent out to a client side or do that type of stuff. So, once we've really thought about, okay, this is what I actually need for this position, regardless of what the job description says, we actually have to think about it. Is this the time for us to go out and do it? No. What I'm actually saying is that you actually want to build a bench. You want to, as somebody who has to choose and you have to hire, you want to do the things like networking. You want to enter in this state of continuously recruiting. When you go out to conferences like this, you want to be building up that bench and looking at people and saying, hey, that's a really, really smart individual. If I need somebody that can do this, I'm going to hire them. There are situations where, there are people back home, various people I know. It's like, I know that they're working in a job that they don't particularly like. I know for a fact that they're, they have great skills. They'd be a good fit with our culture and everything. I don't have a space for them yet, but I'm keeping in the back of my mind. I'm keeping them on the bench, and I keep in touch with them. I send a message every once in a while. Hey, how's it going? What's going on? And I mean, it's not disingenuous. I honestly care. I think they're great people, and I want to have them available the next time I have a position, because I know that I won't have to go through this, craps table kind of process of trying to hire somebody. Another thing that's great that I've done is I've tried to build relationships with a lot of the universities and colleges around the area. You'll find that college professors are, they have a couple traits in along with programmers, is that to be a good one, you have to be kind of suitably lazy. You have to at least, want to find kind of the easy way to get things done. And college professors tend to do that. I mean, if you approach, professors and actually talk to them at universities, say, hey, I run a team that runs a SOC and a bunch of consultants, and I'm interested in coming in and talking to your class just about what I do, about INFOSEC, about what's going on. Generally, they'll jump at the opportunity, and that gives you a chance to get up in front of a bunch of students, tell them about how cool you are, how cool your company is, the cool stuff that you get to do every day if you're like, say, a pen tester or something. You get to tell off all the stories of, wow, I did this, and this was fun, and this is really cool. It gives you a chance to get in front of them, and then, actually try and grab the brightest and best students that are coming out of that program. So when you have an entry-level position, you've actually got somebody who's vetted a little bit. Again, it mostly goes to networking. Another thing that we've tried to do at our company to try and find better employees is just by basically saying, hey, you guys go out, you network, you know your peers, you know what's going on. If you bring us someone to the table that we can hire that's going to contribute to the company, and they stick around for 6 months or a year, and they actually contribute to the company, we'll give you $1,000. We'll just kick out money to you, because we want you to be incentivized to go out and find people to come in and help our organization get better. But here's the thing that you honestly have to keep in mind. The best employees probably already have a job, and that's why when you're doing the whole job search of just looking, and doing postings online, or, God forbid, posting in the newspaper, does people actually do that anymore? you get to a point where you're getting to folks who are just out there looking for a job. They might be desperate. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to find some good people there. But, if you're actually paying attention and you're meeting people who are at a different position, maybe they want to move over and get into INFOSEC. They're just working in IT, but they're fascinated by it. They want to get involved in it. You're actually going to be meeting people that are going to be, employed. They're employable, they're rather stable, and they're able to, you can maybe poach them when the time comes and actually say, give them a better offer, help their career out, and help you guys out. So, getting on to sort of resumes and looking at resumes and going through that whole process, I like to say that resumes are basically the internet of hiring. It's, I don't trust anything that people write on a resume. People tend to make things up. They tend to exaggerate. They tend to, overblow what their role was in a particular organization or what things are. No, I mean, on some extent, having a good resume isn't going to hurt you, but, you really need to think about it and actually say, wait a minute, what's going on with this if somebody claims to have a lot of experience that, you're not really sure of. Just a couple of crazy red flags, and these should be no-brainers to you. Bad spelling, disorganized. I mean, my God, if you guys are sending out your resumes and, they don't have good spelling, they don't have good grammar, they're organized completely nonsensically so that somebody can't just pick up a resume, because I'm busy. I pick it up, I look at it for maybe a couple minutes if it interests me. If it's not organized, I'm not going to be able to follow it, I'm not going to be able to do that. I mean, is it the be-all, end-all? No, but it can give you some trouble along the way. The other one that I love to talk about is people's qualifiers. When they put on their resume, I had exposure to Linux. What does that even mean? Did you see somebody write something or do something in Linux one time, like you looked over their shoulder? I mean, I assisted with a complete network security architecture rebuild. It's like, well, what did you do? Did you actually contribute or did you pull cable? I mean, actually tell me what you actually did. The other one is that when people say that they attended a college or a university, well, it's like either you took a particular class, you graduated, you didn't graduate, you did this. I mean, when somebody attended, I mean, what does that even mean? Did you go to an on-campus presentation once? Did you go for one quarter and then drop out? I mean, what does that even mean exactly? And the other thing, obviously, professionalism. Let's actually, have, some sort of professional email where I can get in touch with you, or at least professional sounding, like maybe your name or something like that. If it's something that's totally goofy, I mean, I don't know. I don't really think it's cute. I don't think it's that funny. When I see it, I just think, what is this? They can't actually make something that actually is semi-normal. The other one people tell you to watch out for, strange gaps in employment. Now, I don't really care that much that, okay, you were out of work for this long. But, I have a hard time believing that you were out of work for 3 years. And I actually think you're probably just concealing something from me, or, maybe you don't want me to talk to that previous employer or do something like that. I don't know what it means. The other thing is that even if you do have a gap, I mean, what were you doing during that time? Did you use it to take classes, or, like they were saying earlier, did you build a lab? Were you learning about everything that you possibly could during that time? Or, were you just sitting around and, collecting unemployment? I mean, what exactly was going on? So, the other thing that, I really want to emphasize to keep in mind, your goal in the whole process is that you want to find the best employee. You don't want to find the best candidate, because sometimes the best candidate will be, totally polished, and they'll have all the certs, and they'll have, everything else, and they'll have the experience, and they'll have all these other things, and on paper they look like the best person, versus somebody whose resume might be a little bit off, it's not quite perfect, and everything, but they have the ability to do the job and get it done. I mean, that's your end goal. You want to be able to accomplish, you have a job that you want them to actually be able to get done. So that's the biggest thing that you want to keep that in mind at all times as you're going through this. I typically like to do a pre-screen, because I've had too many times that you think you've got somebody good as a resume and everything, and out of a busy day where I have a million things to do and getting drug in on a bunch of different projects and everything going on, to schedule even just okay, I got to do interviews today, so I block out a bunch of hour slots to go through, and okay, I've got to interview this guy and interview this guy. Nothing's worse than coming in there and you realize that you just completely wasted your time and theirs. So, a couple of pre-screens that I typically like to do. I mean, if somebody sends me in just a resume or something like that that actually looks interesting, I mean, why not just, fire off an email back to them with just a set of sample questions and say, hey, give me what your responses would be to these situations. You could even set up something on SurveyMonkey or some other site, and what you want to do is just, can this person write a cohesive email? Can they actually, communicate in written form, at a decent level? Some of the things I like to do when I do that, I simulate an email from a pissed off client. I mean, basically, you've got a client that says, it could be something totally simple like, oh God, spam filtering screwed up again. You blocked a critical email for me. You've completely, messed up my entire business process. I've told you guys to fix this and you haven't done it before. I mean, just a total rage email you send to them, and you just basically, you tell them, how would you respond to this? And you actually want to see somebody that's going to at least try and empathize with the guy a little bit and say, I'm really sorry. I apologize for the problem. Can you actually help me with these few things to help troubleshoot this situation and kind of try and talk them down? Say, if you want me to get someone else involved, I can escalate this for you if I can't get it done. I mean, things that would kind of be common sense as far as triage and being able to do that. Can they actually get their mind around that and actually do that? Or even, you could have them write out a list of instructions. Say, okay, I want you to write out directions on how to, investigate a malware infection or something like that. I mean, it can be really simple. Again, not trouble. I mean, I've even seen people do things like, can you diagnose a printer problem? I mean, yes, we're all INFOSEC, but at the same time, if someone can't write out steps to do something like that and actually make them cohesive, something that people can actually follow through, then you don't even want to waste your time with an interview or anything else like that. Another thing that I usually will have do, and this is something that you can kind of, if you've got an HR department or, there's a recruiter or whatever, typically they would probably handle this, but just basic phone pre-screen kind of stuff. Just talk to the person, see what they sound like on the phone, see if they appear to be just, a raging fool, or if they're actually, somebody you might actually be able to work with. And just these are the times that you can really ask those those classic sort of boring interview questions, because mostly you're just wanting to kind of get a feel for, okay, who they are, where are they at, can they convey themselves intelligently, just basic things before you actually waste the time to actually bring them in, schedule an interview, and go through the whole process. One of the things I did want to note in there, I actually have had, and this is something that I'm sure people debate, but, I actually have found better luck asking just right up front, getting the 800-pound gorilla just out in the open right away and just say, hey, what are your salary requirements? What are you expecting to get paid? What would be the minimum level? I know a lot of people like to keep that close to the vest and everything, but let's face it, I have had too many times, well, I wouldn't say too many, but there have been a couple of times that have been incredibly frustrating to me where, you get through the whole process with somebody and you get down to making an offer, and, we're talking entry-level work, and the person has completely unrealistic expectations of what they should get paid, and they decide that, well, I'm just not going to do this or something like that. It can kind of create, it can make things awkward at least a little bit, but, if you can get that out of the open, if it's somebody who's, wanting 6 figures for entry-level work or something that's just ridiculous like that, well, then basically, I'm thinking that, it's probably best that you pass and just kind of go on and look elsewhere, look with someone who's going to fit your organization a little bit better. And anything else you could do there, just bookkeeping, notification, hey, we're going to do a background check. Is that going to be a problem? Anything that you have in your policy, that you have to do, it's not a bad time to tell them that in case they think that there might be some sort of issues there. This is actually something that we've done, and it's actually been quite a bit of fun when we do that. You have your bench, your people that you've kind of been working with, and you've been kind of looking out of, these are some people I know that might be interested in a job at some point, or I might want to hire them. I just set up a happy hour with my team and just kind of go down and invite them. Hey, if I know that you talked to us about this and we don't have anything open right now, but if you want to come out and hang out and have a beer with us, you're more than welcome to. It just gives you a great chance to see how they interact in a social setting, meeting different people, how they see how they just interact with your team and with new people. I mean, if you have to send them out on a client site, or maybe they have to, they're out on a big job, and you tell them, hey, take the clients to lunch, take them to dinner, something like that. Are they going to be able to, not make a fool of themselves in those kind of situations? The other thing that can be interesting is that sometimes you set these things up, and the person will be, they're not, interested in talking to the rest of your team or trying to interact with people. They're actually far more interested in just, kissing butt, and they'll figure out whose job title is the most impressive, and I'm going to, latch onto them all night and everything, and they're not actually, trying to interact with your team and actually see that. I mean, that can be indicative of, well, maybe they're going to have that kind of behavior, once they get hired. So again, you're trying to, kind of weed out people that might be a problem employee later on down the road, and actually just see how they interact with the team. And this is the point. I mean, we're, well into a talk that, its title's about interviewing, and we're actually talking about that. These are all things you can do before you ever even set foot in an interview room. So, when, basically, you want to have this strategy of actually getting the right people into the interview room, and this is, these are kind of the steps that I would recommend that you take to actually get them there. So when it actually comes time to start thinking about the interview, you want to choose your questions, and you want to choose them fairly intelligently. Again, you've made that list. Okay, what's important to me? This is kind of the rule of thumb I use, is sort of say, okay, well, every question I ask, I want to help me identify one of these critical things that I've decided this person has to have before I'm going to offer them a job. Usually I keep it at about 50% technical questions. I kind of look at 1 to 2 questions for anything on my list that's a must-have. If it's something nice to have, maybe I ask a question, maybe I don't. Overall, my philosophy is do about 8 to 10 questions, absolute max. Keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it to a half an hour. Remember, if they're a really strong candidate, or if you have 2 or 3 good, really strong candidates after the first round of interviews, you can always bring them back for a second round and really drill deeper and get more information. But you don't actually have to do everything all at once. You just kind of your interview, you really just want to be able to get a good idea of who they are and what they can bring to you. So this is my actual list. This is what the things I look for when I am hiring somebody. I want to know if they have the technical ability. Can they actually do the job that I actually have a position for? I mean, that's obvious. Now, in some cases, there have been times that I've hired somebody, for the second point, passionate about INFOSEC. It's something they've got to have. I mean, you end up working long hours. Sometimes things get really crazy. You want somebody that's really passionate, who wants to learn about information security. And so sometimes, in some cases, somebody who's come in there has been so full of passion and has done all sorts of things like she was talking about. They got the home lab, and they're, playing with tools all the time, and they're, actually going out and trying out new exploits, learning how things work, figuring things out. But they don't have the exact technical skill set that I was looking for. Sometimes I'm even willing to overlook that and say, you know what? This is somebody who really is passionate about them. I'm going to be able to teach them what I need to be able to do the job easily, because they're going to jump right in. They're going to want to learn. They're going to just dig right into it. And so I can bring them up and train them, especially in an entry-level job. I'm fine with that, as long as they've got the passion, the energy to do it. You have to look at ethics a little bit. A lot of times, being a consulting firm, we have contracts with banks and government and everything, and they expect you to do a bunch of background checks. Have ethical employees and do everything like that. So, that's something that for my job and for our firm, that we have to actually really look at that thing. I also want to look at, how are they going to fit in with the culture? Are they going to be somebody who can interact with people? Are they going to be, somebody who's going to be a good fit within the team? And then, of course, the last is communication and soft skills. Are they actually somebody who can convey themselves properly to clients or anyone else? I've seen interviews where people have just a whole panel. They just have this huge group of people that want to come in there and interview, and they kind of interview by committee. I think it's a terrible idea. I mean, as a manager myself, I'm the one who's going to be their boss. I'm the one who's going to be able to, that's going to be accountable for the work they do. I'm the one who should probably have the bottom line with the decision. So I really advocate, maybe you get a HR person or a recruiter in there to kind of, give you a different perspective, maybe one other person. But for the most part, don't be afraid to kind of empower yourself to make that decision independently, and don't have to bounce it around a committee. The other thing, just to recommend when you're actually interviewing, really don't be afraid to pull the plug on the interview if it's really clear that this interview is going nowhere. I mean, now at the same time, the Will Wheaton rule, don't be a dick. I mean, you don't just need to kick them out after they answer the first wrong question. But it's kind of one of those things that When I'm doing interviews, I usually have the HR manager in the room. We kind of, have that look of, okay, we both know that this isn't going there, and we just start skipping questions and getting through it a little bit quicker. We know that this person isn't going to do it. We don't want to embarrass them. We don't want to make them feel bad. But at the same time, you've reached a point that there's no point in going through and digging through every single little question that you had. It's probably time that you can just, move on. I always recommend that you follow up with questions. If somebody gives an answer, make sure that you actually go through and follow up on what they said. Listen to what they said and try and actually be engaged in what they're telling you. Follow up on their questions. If they tell you about, a project or a tool that they've worked with, ask them more about it. Dig into it a little bit deeper. You're going to find out a little bit more information about how they interact, about what they do, how they think. Also, on top of that, don't ever assume that, if there's some big glaring flaw about them, don't say, hey, they're perfect except for this one thing. If only not this, then, especially if it's a big-time deal breaker, don't assume that you can change them. I mean, it's kind of like, being in a bad relationship. Don't assume that you can change your partner or whoever else. You're getting them what they are. Because, when you're in an interview room, typically people are going to be on their best behavior. So whatever they're doing that's kind of bothering you, it probably is going to be even bigger later on if you actually go through and hire if it's a problem. Of course, as I say at the bottom, that said, no candidate's ever going to be completely 100% perfect. So, don't get yourself into a trap of like being really nitpicky about everything you're doing. The other thing that I love to watch for in a job interview is what I like to call the politician problem. And basically, you want to make sure that they actually answer the question you asked. And it's actually funny. Once you kind of get to know how politicians work and you've watched them talk enough times, you'll realize that when they're on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whatever, when they're on there and they're actually interviewing, the person will ask them a question and they'll maybe give lip service to the question they were just asked, and then they'll just roll into their talking points and they'll start talking about what they actually want to talk about. And typically they're very good at it. Of course, Sarah Palin was not very good at it in the vice presidential debates, where she was basically just shifted gears and said, I'm going to start talking about energy, out of nowhere. But again, that's not going to be that obvious of a clue. But you'll really pay attention and say, hey, are these people actually answering the question that I asked them? If not, then follow up. I mean, make them actually give you the answers you want. There's this whole idea that, hiring is all based on a first impression, that, this whole 14-second rule or 5-minute rule or whatever you want to call it, that people are going to make the hiring decision within the first 14 seconds of the interview. I actually think that can be a mistake. Sometimes that can actually make you, you make snap judgments about somebody, and sometimes you might end up passing over, a diamond in the rough, somebody who's maybe a little rough around the edges but is going to be a great employee. So I strongly encourage you to fight the urge on that. Of course, that once again, that said, people are usually in their best behavior. The first impression, red flags. Somebody comes in there with really poor hygiene. Somebody's, completely, inappropriate, in terms of what they're wearing or whatever. If they just come in with a t-shirt and ratty jeans when they're coming into an interview, I don't know if that's probably, again, if you're going to send them out on client sites, you're going to have to work in a professional environment. Is that the best? Another thing, people, don't be late. I mean, come on. If something crazy happens, as sometimes it does, fine, talk about it. But, if somebody's late, it's sort of indicative of they're a poor planner, they have poor planning skills, poor organization skills. They're not going to be somebody who's going to be able to be punctual and do all this other thing. And one of the things that's just, to me, it's kind of actually surprising. I've encountered it a few times. Somebody thinks that they're actually doing you a service in an interview by sitting there and bad-mouthing their current employer and talking about how terrible their current job is and how much they hate it, and how much this competitor or somebody they work with, they just totally suck, they're stupid, I hate working for them and everything like that. It's like, yeah, it's all well and good to trash the competition and talk about things, but at the same time, that's really kind of indicative that maybe you are complaining a lot, that you're just that kind of person who's going to like to talk shit a bit too much. And so, I typically consider that a red flag. That's a little odd to me. So when you actually get in there, the other thing, keep this in mind. When you start off interviewing somebody, this is probably going to be their first impression of you as well. So on top of that, don't be late. Don't, make sure you highlight the stuff about your corporate culture and the place you work, what makes it cool. You want to be able to just really highlight and explain exactly what you expect this person to be doing for you on a day-to-day basis. Employees are going to know, or prospective employees are going to know, hey, your job description's probably not right. What am I actually going to be doing on a day-to-day basis? Make sure that you can tell them that, what their role is going to be, what their position is. At the same time, you don't have to give away the keys to the farm and say, well, I'm looking for someone that's passionate. I'm looking for somebody, that's done this and done that. Because, people tend to start talking to, well, you just told me what you want to hear, so I guess I better say exactly what you said you wanted to hear. Top of that, these are kind of red flags that if you, as an interviewee, actually are going into an interview and you want to actually, you're judging your employer and you're thinking about that, if you're interviewing somebody, don't be late. Their time's important to actually show that respect. Obviously, sometimes fires happen, something happens, and you go in there and you can explain that or whatever, but be respectful of their time. Treat them like you would any other client meeting or anything else that you have. Be good to them. Don't badmouth the person that they're replacing. Don't just say, oh, hey, I'm sure you'll be 10 times better than the last guy. That doesn't, people think, and they basically, when you hear them say that, it works on both sides, the employer, the employee side. When I leave this company, are they going to blame everything on me? Am I going to be that scapegoat? Or are they going to trash me to everyone they see? It's probably not, a culture. It's kind of maybe indicative of this culture is a little bit more of a blaming culture. It's not something where people just get along and they do that. Obviously, like I said, if you can't explain what the role is going to be, then it's kind of a good idea that maybe they just don't even know what they're going to do with you. They just kind of want you in there. If they have a good description of exactly what your role is going to be, it's going to help you out a lot. Make sure you actually look at somebody's resume. These are basic, just common courtesies. Don't check your email while they're sitting there answering a question to you. It's just basically rude. So, now I'm just going to jump into some basic interview questions. These I like to call the classics. Please list your strengths and your weaknesses. Are you a team player, and where do you see yourself in 5 years? Okay, in my opinion, these questions are ultimately worthless. They're not going to give me any information that I actually want to know about how to hire somebody, about what I want. Somebody asks, are you a team player? Why, yes, I'm a team player. Of course you're just going to answer that way. Strengths and weaknesses, I'm going to highlight what I think the greatest strength that will get me this job, and I'm basically going to try and camouflage a weakness, or I'm going to say, I just work too darn hard as a weakness. These are questions that are not really useful to people. Everyone likes to ask them. I personally don't, enjoy them very much. I don't think they give me any particular data I need. The questions I like to ask are things like, I want to determine, are you passionate about INFOSEC? First thing I'll ask in every single interview, where do you get your INFOSEC news from? Let me tell you, I have had people tell me they get their INFOSEC news from CNN. I'm not lying. Or they'll say, oh yeah, I occasionally read the computer stories on, MSN.com. Okay, you're not actually passionate about INFOSEC. I was having a great conversation with Patrick last night, and he made the comment of, you're in IntroSec, you're passionate about INFOSEC, you're not interested in INFOSEC. If you're just interested in it, then you're kind of just looking at a job. You got to be passionate about it. You got to actually know what you want to do. Again, just like, even Johnny was saying earlier, what does your home lab look like? I've asked people this. I've said, how do you practice your tools? How do you learn about, information security stuff? Because new stuff's coming out all the time, and there's going to be times when, say you're a consultant, you're out on the road just churning out jobs, and sometimes that can be pretty rough, but how are you learning about new things? How are you keeping up on them? That's a good question. The other one, and I've asked this before, and just be like, basically, what's the coolest hack you've ever encountered? And you could totally see, somebody who's just looking for a job, they're going to be, they'll have to think about it, they'll have to do this. Somebody's really passionate about it, their eyes just light up. It's like, if you go over there in the bar and say, what's the coolest shit you ever saw? Their eyes are going to light up, they're going to knock back a beer, and they're going to tell you all about it, maybe even tell you too much. But that's fine. You're actually out there, and you want to, there's somebody that actually you want to, they want to tell you about their passion for information security. Other things about ethics, these ones are kind of, softball. Like the first one is tell me an ethical dilemma you faced in the past. That's not actually that bad of a question because people actually have an idea of what an ethical dilemma is. They could talk through it. Other times you can give a scenario, you know, like you're working at a client site, you discover the IT guy is basically, you know, illegally from that corporate IT network trying to hack into their third-party web provider so he can prove that it's not secure. You know, it's, you know, and that kind of happened to me one time. So that was an interesting audit. I'm like, dude, you probably shouldn't be telling me that. Good for you. But basically give them an opportunity to really sort of say, okay, how are they going to handle a situation like that? The other crazy one is, you know, are you going to fit in with our culture? Yeah, there's a lot of the culture questions can revolve around, you know, what are the positive aspects of your current job? I mean, get them to talk about the things that they actually like about where they are now or what they're doing. And sometimes that'll give you a good indication of how they like to fit in with a group and what they like about their current job. Because there's going to be positive things. I mean, if they say something like, nothing, you know, well, you know, again, are they somebody who can really, you know, focus on the positive, actually keep things light in a work atmosphere? You know, when you work in a team, what's your role? I mean, how do you fit in with a group? I mean, are you, as an entry-level guy, going to expect to come in day one and be in charge of everyone in the group? Probably not. So, you know, it's kind of a good idea. Just, you know, see how they fit in with the group. The one I always like to ask, you know, in every single interview, and a lot of times I drop it in right after a really, really hard technical question, is I'll just flat out ask them ninjas, pirates, or zombies. I mean, it seems like the most bizarre question you're saying there. How am I actually getting useful information from this? I actually have. I've had guys who come in there and I ask them that question. They look at me like I grew a horn in my head and I'm the biggest frickin' idiot that they've ever seen. You know, if somebody doesn't have a sense of humor, they can't at least keep it light. They can't at least joke around a little bit. You know, I don't know if there's somebody that's going to fit in with our group. We're a really light group. We like to have fun. We like to, you know, talk, have a good time. So, you know, that's the question. I mean, you know, on top of that, soft skills, you know, basic stuff. Have you researched the company before you came to an interview? Did you sit down and actually find out about what we do so you understand it? Are we just another, you know, stop on your I need a job tour, or are we somebody that you actually want to work with? Another soft skill type question I love to ask. You know, I'll say, okay, take a man-in-the-middle attack. I would like you to explain to me exactly how it works to the HR manager that's sitting next to me. Make sure that she can understand exactly how this thing works and have a good idea. You know, if you can't convey your ideas to management or to non-technical people, then you're not going to be able to communicate and actually be a real true asset to the rest of the organization, in my opinion. On top of that, the other one I like to, this is sort of the, are you a technician, are you an engineer, are you a consultant kind of question. I mean, how do you actually look at something? I asked just a very broad question, which is probably the most broad you can get. What does it take to effectively manage an information security for an organization? And basically, this question will tell you actually quite a bit about a candidate. If they are just a pure technician, like all they've ever done is like help desk support and everything, their mind gets really focused on the endpoint. And they sit there and they start telling you all the stuff about the endpoint and everything. Engineers start thinking about architecture and everything. People, you know, some people actually can get that big picture view and they understand, okay, we got policy here and training here and you've got, you know, all of your widgets here and then you've got the endpoint here and then you got to train your people here and they've got a big picture. Those are the people that actually get a little bit more of the understanding. And of course, it all depends on the role that you're actually doing. If it's entry-level analyst, do they need to have that big picture? You know, maybe not, but it certainly helps. It gives you a good idea as to where their head's at and how they see information security. Finally, this is the stuff that we're really good at, is actually coming up with good technical questions. The other stuff, I kind of feel like, you know, judging soft skills and all those other things, are we really that good at it? Is it something that we, you know, excel at? That's the stuff we haven't had training for. For the technical stuff, this is something we should be great at. Sometimes I think that we, you know, fall down or we get a little bit lazy and we don't actually grill the people as hard as we could on this technical stuff. You know, overall, the biggest thing I'd say is don't be afraid to make those questions hard. If, you know, your best employee is going to be the one who's going to rise to the occasion, who's going to like the challenge. Even if they don't quite know exactly the answer to your question, they're going to be able to talk through it, they're going to be able to work through it, actually get to a reasonable answer, or at least give you some information that you want. So when I actually go for technical questions, I mean, some of these are actually going to make you laugh because of how easy they are, but I can't tell you how many times I've had an interviewee suddenly fall down on something as simple as this. Okay, describe to me how a botnet works. Okay, if you're in information security and you can't actually tell me how a botnet works, that's probably a problem. It shows you don't have any passion, you're not actually looking at anything ever, you know, you haven't actually looked at things. You know, I love to throw that one out, and I cannot tell you how many people have gone through and have told me, oh, I have this cert, and I have done this, and I've got all this experience, yet they don't even have the basic concepts of, say, malware and botnets and how they actually work. You know, another one that's kind of easy you can throw out, you know, that in some ways is, you know, you can just ask about encoding, encryption, hashing, all very different things. They sound the same. People don't quite understand it. My favorite one, and I love to do this, I actually have a printed out packet capture of just Wireshark. And all I did, I opened up Wireshark, I browsed to ESPN.com, and I stopped Wireshark. That's all I did. And I just printed out that PCAP, and I'll slide it over in front of people. And you'll be amazed at when people think that, oh, I've got to tell you about something cool with this, they'll just start inventing stuff. I've had somebody tell me, I mean, it's seriously, you know, DNS, TCP established, HTTP, nothing else. And I've had people tell me that, oh, that's a denial of service attack of some kind that's going on, or that's some sort of malware that's trying to do this. People are very inventive when they actually don't know what's going on. So, I mean, I just encourage you, throw out some softballs, and sometimes at that point you'll know, okay, this interview's not going to work. You know, we've already kind of, they've done a swing and a miss at a couple of easy ones I threw at them. Let's just kind of move along and go from there. Some other samples as we get maybe a little bit harder. I mean, ask them to really kind of go through and explain, okay, where would you find blind SQL injection? How would it work? What would you use it for? How would you actually execute it? Another question you can ask is, you know, think about, okay, can you just list all the different ways that you can think of to prevent malware from executing on an endpoint? I mean, you know, are we talking, are they going to just, you know, say antivirus and nothing else? Are they going to start going to whitelisting? Are they going to start talking about, you know, other things you can put in the environment? I mean, just basically open-ended questions, get a good idea of how they think. You know, if you want to get, you know, a little bit harder, you know, you flat out, you know, ask them about public key cryptography. I mean, you know, you could ask them to explain the difference between a buffer flow and a heap spray. You know, as you get, you know, ramp it up a little bit, get a little bit more difficult. You know, even if, you know, you're looking for an entry-level guy and he doesn't know the answers to these questions, you could at least get a good idea of, okay, here's where their knowledge starts, here's where they end. Are they better at AppSec? Are they better at, you know, network security? Are they better at exploits? What do they know? What do they don't know? The other thing, and they alluded to it earlier as well, a demo's worth 1,000 interview questions. If you can actually get somebody to show you what they know instead of just telling you in an interview answer, that's a far more effective demonstration. So, you know, if you're hiring a pen tester, I mean, for crying out loud, you know, at the very least, have them whiteboard out, you know, give them some Nmap scan and have them whiteboard out. This is what the network looks like. This is, I would want you to diagram how you would attack it. Where are the points that you would start looking for problems? What would you do? What would you check? Actually have them walk you through it. I mean, something else, you know, just give them, you know, I've given them the name of the founder of the company and told them, hey, just go out and gather as much information as you can for me, and then, you know, 10 to 15 minutes from now, tell me a spear phishing campaign you'd use on this guy. You know, I swear one day I'm going to make an interviewee call my wife and try and get my wife's credit card number. I want to do that at some point. I haven't done it yet. Obviously, also with a pen tester, have a lab network there, have them hack it, have them go in there and actually show you that they know what they're doing. You know, maybe if you got a security analyst, just have them parse through a packet capture, have them parse through something interesting, have them look at a SIM, show you that they understand actually what's going on with it. Make sure that they understand the risk of different events and how they interact with the organization. I mean, if you got an engineer or an architect, I mean, you know, you're not going to get through it without actually having them, you know, maybe if they're a guy that's supposed to be, you know, like the one thing you need them to do is, you know, deal with Cisco firewalls or Palo firewalls or whatever, you know, that, you know, there's no reason why you shouldn't have one of those devices on the desk and say, okay, either I want you to configure this, I want you to set up some firewall rules, or, you know, this thing is completely broken, I want you to fix it for me. I mean, have them do lab examples of the actual work that you're going to be having them do. If they can't do it, you know, that's going to be a good indication that, you know, if they, well, and if they look at it, it's going to be a good indication of whether or not they can actually do the work. The other thing is, by actually making questions hard, I've seen it so many times in an interview, the first time somebody fails or they actually have something go wrong in the interview for them and they actually know, oh crap, I do not know the answer to this question, they just fold. They fold up their tent and they go home. They completely check out. They basically consider themselves they've completely failed. And the reality is, a lot of times in INFOSEC, you are going to fail at doing what you're trying to do. Having somebody in the interview room who's just going to check out, that isn't going to actually go through, you know, the whole process, you know, that's not somebody that you exactly want to have on your team. I don't think it's beneficial. So, you know, you've reached a point, you know, you're done for the interview. Obviously, the basic thing that everyone does is, do you have any questions for us? And I think that's a great thing. It can be a good indication of how interested that they are if you actually like them. You know, if they're starting to ask you questions about the organization, like what's the benefit package looks like, you know, what's a normal week look like for me? What am I doing? You know, clarifications on role and everything. I mean, that's an engaged interview candidate. I mean, people who don't ask questions are probably just assuming, well, I'm not going to get the job, or I don't really want it, or whatever else. I love when people actually ask questions and they've actually listened to the things that I've told them about it. Again, highlight the things about your company that makes it unique, that makes it cool, that you want to tell people. You know, if you have any expectations for them, make sure you hammer those out and tell them. I mean, you know, for our security analysts, one of our big clients basically said flat out, you have to have some people, everyone who works on the SOC has to have a security certification of some sort. So we're like, okay, fine. So we tell them, you look, you know, if you get hired, you got 90 days. If you don't have one, you got to go out and get something. And then just be nice to them. You know, give them a reasonable expectation. When am I actually going to hear back from you? When are you going to, when are you going to make a decision? I mean, it's just a matter of kind of being courteous to the people. And just sort of my last piece of advice that I'll give you on this whole thing is that, you know, you bring someone into your organization, you spend all this time, you know, kind of recruiting them, going through the interview process, finding someone that you really think is good. Keep in mind that the way you actually bring them into your organization is going to be important, and this, frankly, could be a whole other talk in and of itself. But people are going to remember the first day and the last day of their job probably more than any other days that you'll have in the entire time. So really try and make it something that's a positive memory, something that they're actually going to do that. Nobody, you know, I think it's really a shame when somebody comes into a new job, they're all excited, they're like, man, I'm starting this new job, and you just sap all the energy out of them by having them spend the entire day looking at training videos or filling out paperwork and reading the employee handbook and all those other things. Yeah, there's some of that paperwork that needs to get done, but integrate them into your culture right away. I mean, our culture around the office, everyone who's hired is issued a Nerf gun, and they're expected to defend themselves at all times. So basically, you can expect that if they don't actually man up and actually start shooting somebody, they're just going to get annihilated at some point during the day. You know, maybe that's mean, but, you know, it's a part of the culture of basically you're saying, you know, this is something fun that we do. This is something that's going on. And by the end of the day, even if they got capped a couple of times, they're firing them off back at everyone else, and they're having a great time, and they're having fun with your team, and they're part of your actual culture. Also, if you can, have them contribute on day one, even if it's a simple project, something stupid that, you know, you just need to get done. Have them do something. Have them actually contribute and not just job shadow or do something else like that, so that they can actually say, you know, hey, they go home, yeah, hey, I actually got this done, and you can pat them on the back when they're going out the door and say, hey, man, that was really helpful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you guys are, that you're part of our company, that you're part of doing this. You can actually do that. So, the sort of my last slide here that I have is kind of regards the next steps about this process, you know, of, you know, going through and interviewing and, you know, hiring and everything like that. I mean, I'd love to be able to give back to the community somehow in this regard, and I don't know if that's, you know, trying to collect all the various random interview questions that float all around the internet that you might find, or ones that you come up with. I mean, try and come up with some sort of database, or maybe have some sort of forum for discussion, or maybe just, you know, have a talk about it every once in a while. But I mean, it's something that, you know, I'm passionate about. I'm, you know, excited to be here. And, you know, overall, I want to thank Bsides for having me out to be able to talk about this. And, hope it's something that you guys find interesting, you learn about, and if you want to talk about it a little bit more, I'm on Twitter at Delisnia, and those are my email addresses. So, yeah. So thank you guys very much for your time. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me.